Ubiquiti has just released UniFi OS Server, and it's kind of like the next generation of self-hosted UniFi network controller. In this video, we're going to cover everything. We're going to talk about UniFi OS Server itself, the features, the advantages that it has over previous versions of self-hosted controllers, and we're going to do a complete installation, a Linux-hosted installation of UniFi OS Server, including a Let's Encrypt certificate, as well as UFW firewall rules. So we've got a lot to cover in this video, but if you've been thinking about installing UniFi OS Server yourself, this is where you want to start. Let's go. Okay, so as you can see, UniFi OS Server is designed for MSPs. It specifically says UniFi OS Server for MSPs. And what that means is it's a self-hosted controller that's designed to work with the UniFi devices that don't have UniFi OS on board. So if we look at the UniFi store, that's going to be all of this stuff under advanced hosting, right? So we've got the gateway enterprise, anything that's a UXG instead of a UCG. UCG being cloud gateway controller. These are the non-cloud gateway controllers. So the gateway fiber, the gateway light, gateway max, etc. Essentially what this is the official UniFi hosting, but you can self-host it yourself. And there are a lot of advantages to UniFi OS Server. Primarily, in my opinion at least, the biggest advantage is that it comes with UniFi OS and application updates managed through the controller, right? So previously with the old hosted versions of UniFi, like I've had one in DigitalOcean forever, with the old hosted versions of UniFi, you had to go in and run updates via the CLI yourself. So you had to stop the controller, download the latest update, run the update, restart the controller. It was kind of a pain. So now you get the experience of letting UniFi OS manage the updates for UniFi OS, UniFi applications, etc., all within UniFi. So it makes it a lot easier to sort of keep up to date on that stuff. And of course, you can also enable auto updates so that you don't actually have to go in and remember to do updates on a regular basis. It also opens up some capabilities that weren't available with the older hosted versions of UniFi Network, including the ability to use UniFi Site Magic, the ability to use UniFi Interspace, the ability to use UniFi Identity, right? So they're basically taking their paid hosted controller that you could have bought previously, and they're saying, here, you can now have this software and self-hosted. And any of the sites that you're self-hosting with UniFi OS Server can still be managed through their cloud interface at unifi.ui.com, so you still get that single pane of glass between your self-hosted sites as well as your cloud gateway sites. All right, so looking at the requirements here, now keep in mind that this is still considered early access, so you might run into some bugs and it might not be fully supported as of the recording of this video. But here we have some system requirements: minimum 20 gigs of free disk space, and then you have to have these various software dependencies. These are the ports that it's going to use, etc. And then down here we have our download links. While UniFi OS Server is available for Windows, and it's available for Mac, and it's available for Linux, if you're just testing it out with a single site, like if you want a locally hosted UniFi OS controller just for the stuff that you're running around your house or your small business, that's fine. You can run it on Windows or Mac. But if you are actually an MSP and you are looking to run this as part of your business, as for your customers, a multi-site UniFi OS server, use Linux, all right? Don't use any of these other things, because Windows and Mac, it's not as, how do you say this? They're just not going to be as serious an application, and they're not going to be as seriously supported as Linux. And again, the way we're going to do it in this video is with hosted Linux in the cloud with full firewall rules and all of that. So again, if you're just playing around with it and you want to try it out, Windows and Mac, sure, go ahead and install it. But if you're real about this, if you're serious about your UniFi OS Server installation, use Linux like we're going to do in this video. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with that Linux installation. Two quick things before we do get started. Number one, I will have full written instructions for everything that I'm doing in this video in a blog post on crosstalksolutions.com. I will have a link down in the description to that blog post if you'd rather follow along with the written instructions that allow you to copy and paste the commands and stuff like that. It's much, much easier. And also, if you're looking at this whole setup and you're like, man, I'd really like a UniFi OS server, but all this Linux stuff, I don't know, and Chris just scared me off of using Windows for this thing. That's what Crosstalk Solutions is for, right? We are available to help you out with this kind of stuff. So you can hire us to troubleshoot UniFi, to set up UniFi OS server, whatever you want to do. We are here for you. Again, contact us at crosstalksolutions.com. Okay, so now let's hop right into the installation. And again, we're doing a hosted Linux installation. I'm going to use DigitalOcean, but you can use any number of hosting providers, or you can certainly install it on a bare metal Linux server in your own environment. If you do that, you're going to have to deal with all the firewall rules yourself. I'm just going to show you how to do it with DigitalOcean. So I'm going to start by saying create a droplet. I'll just pick a region that's close to me, like San Francisco here. And then we're going to use Ubuntu. That's perfectly fine. And then for the droplet size, let's use a shared basic CPU. I'm going to go down here to regular. And then I'm going to do this $12 per month droplet size. Remember, one of the requirements for UniFi OS Server was a minimum 20 gigabyte hard drive or 20 gigs worth of space. The $6 a month one technically will work because it's got 25 gigs, but we're going to give it a little bit more power with 2 gigs of RAM and a little bit more transfer capability here. And again, if you've got a ton of UniFi sites that you're planning on hosting with UniFi OS Server, you might want to think about bumping up to one of the higher levels of performance as well. All right, scrolling down with DigitalOcean, if this is a production server, I certainly would recommend doing automated backups. Since this is just a temporary one for this video, I'm not going to do that. And for authentication methods, same thing. If I were doing this for real, I would probably do an SSH key for authentication. But since this is just temporary for YouTube, I'm going to do a password so we can log in with root and then this password, and that'll be perfectly fine for this install. So let me generate a strong password first. Okay, I have my strong password, and scrolling down a little bit more, we also need to give this a host name. So what I like to do here is create an actual host name because you're gonna need one, right? So you're gonna have a domain with an A record host. This is for the Let's Encrypt certificate. Now, technically, you don't have to use that name here. I can put whatever I want for host name for the DigitalOcean droplet, but it makes it easier to identify if we use the actual host name. So let's go ahead and do that here. I'm going to say UniFi self-host.crosstalknetworking.com. And then, of course, use your own fully qualified domain name yourself. And we're going to say create droplet. Okay, and my droplet has been created and we can see the IP address right here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that IP address because I want to actually create the A record for this fully qualified domain name. And in my case, it's hosted with Cloudflare, which actually works really well because Let's Encrypt, we're also going to use Cloudflare for the authentication of the Let's Encrypt certificate. We're going to get to that in just a bit. But let's go ahead and copy that right there. And then over here in Cloudflare, I'm going to click on that domain. I'm going to click on DNS, and I'm going to say add record. And then the name is UniFi self-host. And then we can see that it's populated the fully qualified domain name here. I'm going to turn off the proxy status. We want DNS only, and I'm going to say save. Okay, now back in DigitalOcean, here's the IP address that we're going to want to connect to. So I'm going to copy that, and then we're going to open up PuTTY. And then we're going to connect to that host name. We're going to say open. And it opened up in my other window, but it did ask me to accept the cert. Let me change the settings here so it's a little bit easier to see. Okay, there we go. And now we can log in as root. And then with the password, the strong password that we generated during the DigitalOcean droplet creation. Okay, so we are now logged into our DigitalOcean droplet. Since this is Ubuntu, the first thing that we're going to want to do here is get this thing updated. So we're going to say sudo apt update and sudo apt upgrade -y. And yes, I do know that I logged in as root, so I technically do not have to use sudo to do this, but it's force of habit. So we're going to do it anyways. Here we go. So now we're going to pop over to the installation notes or the blog post for UniFi OS Server. And if you sort by oldest, the top comment here actually shows you how to do the installation. So it starts right here. We'll move this over with apt get podman. Now podman, apt-get install podman. Now podman, yes, is basically a container application. So similar to Docker, but it's like Docker, but it's the one that Ubiquiti chose to use for this particular server installation. Okay, so Podman is now installed. And if we look at our download links here, I want Linux x64. So I'm going to right click on that. I'm going to copy link address. We're going to go back to my shell here, and we're going to say wget shift insert, and that's going to download the x64 version of this software. Okay, downloaded, and now this was a little bit unclear in the instructions, but it says download the file chmod plus x. So that's going to change the characteristics to make that downloaded file executable. So we'll say chmod plus x, 8b, blah, 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 enter. And then it says, and run it with the install parameter. And that was a little bit unclear, but basically what that means is we just have to say ./8b, blah, 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 install, enter. You are about to install UOS Server version 4.2.23. Proceed, yes. And now it is installing UniFi OS Server into that Podman container. Okay, there we go. Installation complete. That took about 30 seconds or so, so just be patient. And now we can see UOS server is running at https my IP address :11443. Now, I will tell you, it does take a moment to launch and actually start working. So don't think you can just immediately go to that URL and it'll be there. But give it a minute or so, have a little bit of patience, and then it will show up. So throughout all that talking there, it's probably okay now. So let's try it. Okay, so we can see here that I have put the IP address into my browser, and it has now given me this unsecure HTTPS warning, but we're going to proceed through that, and we can see UniFi OS server booting. So we are well on our way to having this server up and running. And once this boots, I'm going to pause this here, but once this boots, I will come back and we will start with the next steps. Okay, so we are back, and the first step is to name your UniFi OS server, and of course you could also restore from backup. Notice this option down below. So we're going to call this Crosstalk hosted UniFi. Now right here it says create a Ubiquiti account or sign in. So we are going to sign in. But let me pause here to look at this down below for a second. It says this software is licensed for personal or organizational use only. Resale, redistribution, or commercial exploitation is strictly prohibited. Now, what they're basically saying there is like, look, we're giving you this software so you can self-host UniFi. Don't resell UniFi hosting using our free software, right? So that's basically what they're saying there is don't try to make a business out of saying, hey, I'm going to charge you $50 a month to host your UniFi, but really you're just, hosting it in their free software. So they don't want you doing that. But we're going to say sign in, and then you want to enter your Ubiquiti single sign-in credentials and then get through whatever multi-factor authentication. Okay, so I have successfully logged in, and from here we can decide to restore from backup, which I'm not going to do. This is a fresh installation, so I'm going to click. My face is in the way here, but if you, down in the bottom right, there's an option that says continue without backups. We're going to click that, and now it is setting up UniFi OS. Okay, that is now complete. So let's go to dashboard. And here we go. We now have a new instance of UniFi in our self-hosted controller. Now, keep in mind that right now, this is a single site controller. But if you're an MSP, you're likely going to have multiple customers. Each customer is going to want their own site. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to switch this to a multi-site UniFi. So to do that, we're going to go to Settings. We're going to click on System. And then right here where it says Site Management, we want to check this box that says Multi-Site Management. And if we read the information pop-up, it says use multiple logically separated sites to manage groups of devices and site configurations. So we're going to do that, and we're going to say Apply. And after we said Apply, notice I now have a site switcher that has popped up here in the upper left-hand corner. So I can click on that right now. All we have is this default site. So let me change the name of that. So I'm going to say Settings, System, And actually, I'm not seeing where to change the name of the default site. That might actually show up in a little bit, or it might only show up when I have multiple sites. Let me add a new site. We're going to do one called, we'll call customer 1, right? So this is, say, our first customer that we're adding here. And now I can switch to, there we go. Okay, so now site name shows up. Perfect. Okay, so that's what it was. You just have to have multiple sites. So I can switch to customer 1, and this is the customer 1 site, and then I can switch to the default site. And now I can change the name. We can call this like Crosstalk default and apply that change. And now if we go to if we log into unifi.ui.com, we will now see these sites that I've created show up in unifi.ui.com. And you can even group them by this specific UniFi OS server. All right, so the next thing that I want to do here, we are not secure yet, right? So there's a couple of things we need to do. We need to get Let's Encrypt working so that we can use our fully qualified domain name to connect to this server. And then we also want to lock it down so that we're not opening up every single port for this server to the whole wide world. We want to do some firewall rules in Linux. So let's do both of those things now. But first, I'm switching over to the fully qualified domain name instead of the IP address. Because remember, we created this fully qualified domain name, we added it to Cloudflare as an A record, and now it is propagated out so that we can use it. It's still not secure, but at least we are now in UniFi self-host.crosstalknetworking.com. And then, of course, it uses port 11443. So let me log in here. Okay, there we go. We are now logged in using the fully qualified domain name. So let's do the SSL cert. One of the comments in this EA sort of blog post where you've got all these comments down below that tell you how to install it, etc. This person here, I want to give credit where credit is due. Morano Verhoef from the Netherlands. Awesome job, Morano Verhoef, has created a UniFi OS Server SSL import script. This worked perfectly for me the first time that I tried it. Okay, so the first thing we need to do here is apt update, and we need to install into our server Let's Encrypt and this Python 3 certbot DNS Cloudflare DNS plugin. Okay, so let's do that now. Okay, so apt update, and we can install both of these packages together. So I'm going to say apt install Let's Encrypt space Python 3-certbot-DNS-Cloudflare. Bring this over so we can actually see it. Bring it up so we can actually see it. And then -y. Okay, easy enough. Those have both been installed. And now we need to run through these other settings here. So this is basically going to allow Cloudflare to authenticate our Let's Encrypt certificate. And we need to do that with an API token or an access token. So we're going to first create the file that has our access token, and then we will request our Let's Encrypt certificate. Okay, so we're going to say make dir-p/root/.secrets touch. This is going to create a new file root/secrets/cloudflare.ini. Then we're going to edit that file nano/root/.secrets/cloudflare.ini. And we want to basically copy this line here and shift insert that into here. And now we need to get our Cloudflare API token. Okay, so let's go do that next. Back in Cloudflare, I'm going to drop down my little profile over here. We're going to select profile. Then we want to come over here to API tokens, and we're going to say create token. So we're going to use this edit zone DNS template. And then we have zone DNS edit. These are the permissions for the API token. We're going to add another one. This one's going to be zone DNS read. So we have edit and read permissions. And then right here we have zone resources, right? So we could just leave this wide open, but we actually want to lock it down to my domain, which is crosstalknetworking.com. Again, this is why it's helpful to have your domain in Cloudflare already, because it makes this stuff so much easier. Now, you can further lock this down if you like, for example, to the IP address of your server or something like that. But for me, this is perfectly fine. And then we're going to say continue to summary, create token. Now, this is the only time this token will ever be displayed. Okay, so make sure you copy this and keep it in a safe location. And then back in our server, we're just going to paste it where it says your token here. Control X, yes, enter to save that file. And next we need to set our permissions for the Cloudflare the secrets folder and the Cloudflare.ini file. So we're going to say chmod 0700 /root/.secrets. And we're going to say chmod 0400 /root/.secrets/Cloudflare.ini. And now we can request our certificate, but in this line right here, we actually want to replace your.domain.com with your actual fully qualified domain name. So I'm going to copy this, paste it into a text editor, edit my own domain name in, and then copy it again and paste it into the command line. Okay, shift insert. Let me double check my domain name. Yes, unifiselfhost.crosstalknetworking.com, and that looks good. Now notice the challenge here. Preferred challenges is DNS01. Let me go ahead and run that. Oh, it needs my email address. Okay, answered yes to a couple of questions. Now notice that the challenge is DNS, right? So typically with old school Let's Encrypt, the challenge was HTTP. So you had to have port 80 open. But now that the challenge is DNS, you don't need port 80 open anymore. So when we do the firewall rules, you'll notice that I am not opening port 80 for Let's Encrypt because you don't have to. Okay, successfully received certificate. And now it's saved the certificate onto this system. So now we need to install the import script. This is the last step. This is actually going to bring that Let's Encrypt certificate into UniFi. So this script is going to stop UniFi, import the script, and then restart UniFi. So let's go ahead and copy this, shift insert, enter. Now we've downloaded the script. Let's make it executable. Chmod +x /user/local bin UniFi, whatever it is. Now it's executable. Now let's go ahead and edit it. nano-w/user/local/bin/UniFi, whatever. We need to put our own host name in here. Control X, yes, enter. And now we can run the script /user local bin UniFi script, etc., etc. Boom. Stopping UniFi controller. Boom. Installed the cert, started UniFi controller. And then the last step here, if you notice behind the screen, is to make sure that we add some lines to the cron tab file that will check the certificate or renew that Let's Encrypt certificate. It looks like it says twice a day. So we're going to say nano-w/etc cron tab, scroll down to the bottom, copy these lines right here, shift insert, enter, control X, yes, enter, and now Let's Encrypt is completely set up. So let's close our browser tab and try to reopen it and see if we're secure. Okay, so everything is back up. UniFi services have restarted, and oddly enough, it actually says not secure. I think this might just be some sort of caching issue with the Chrome browser or something like that, although I did clear the last hour of history and it's still showing this. But it says not secure, but if we click on it, it does say the certificate is valid, right? So it does say that it's a valid Let's Encrypt certificate. Additionally, if I go to Firefox, Firefox thinks the site's secure. So, I don't know, just some weirdness there. That might be an error that will go away, over time or something like that. But right now, it looks like it did work. It's just Chrome is not reporting it correctly. And of course, if you guys know the answer to that problem, put it down in the comments below in case anyone else runs into it. They can look through the comments. But for now, let's go ahead and move on. The next thing that we need to do, because right now this is open to everyone, right? And all ports to my DigitalOcean droplet are open to everyone. So we want to lock it down a little bit. And in order to do that, we want to create some firewall rules. And in the early access blog post, we can see that the ports used are right here. There are a bunch of them that are used for different things. So let's go ahead and allow these ports only. And then additionally, I'm going to allow SSH port 22, but locked down to my WAN IP address only. So again, all of this will be in the blog post, but I'm just going to go ahead and bust through it really quickly here. And first thing I can do is say UFW status, and we should see that UFW is currently inactive. That's because by default, there is no firewall on the DigitalOcean droplet. So let's go ahead and start adding firewall rules. Let's reset everything first. We're going to say UFW reset. Now let's say UFW default deny incoming. So we're going to block everything by default. Now keep in mind, this hasn't blocked anything yet. We actually have to turn on UFW. We're just creating the rules. UFW default allow outgoing. That's going to allow all of our outgoing traffic to work just fine. And then we have rules for all of those ports that were listed in the blog post. And the way that I'm doing this here is, again, go ahead and look at my blog post. You can see all of these rules that I'm putting in, and then you can just copy paste them. But so then in this case, it's UFW allow 3478, and then we added comments here that tells you exactly what each one of these rules does. So let me bust through this. I'm going to copy and paste all of these. There are a number of rules to do. Okay, there we go. And one thing that I did here that if you go to the blog post, I lock SSH down to my WAN IP address or to a WAN IP address. I didn't do that here because this is just a temporary server. I'm going to destroy this by the time you're seeing this video, so I'm not too worried about the security. But in my own UniFi OS server that I already set up previous to this, I did lock it down so that SSH is only available from my authorized WAN IP addresses. All right, so now we can say UFW status again. Oh, it's still inactive. Sorry, we have to enable it. So UFW enable. Now UFW status. And now we can see all of these rules for UniFi have been added. Let me expand this out a little bit and do it again. There we go. Okay, so all of the rules for UniFi ports have been added, and then SSH, again, not locked down because this is only temporary. And right now, what I would suggest, especially if you did lock down SSH, is leave this session up in PuTTY, because if you did something incorrectly, you're not going to be able to reconnect to the server, and you're going to have to start this whole thing over from scratch. So what I would do is open up a second PuTTY window now. So I'm just going to say duplicate session, and it should log in. So it didn't time out. So I know this is going to work. But, you know, PuTTY is now, the firewall is enabled and SSH is still working. Yeah, so I'm logged back in, so we know that everything's okay. I should still be able to bring up the controller. And I am, even though it is still giving me that not secure error in Chrome, but that's okay. But we now know that our firewall rules are working and have been applied correctly, and any other ports that are outside of those rules should not be accessible from the outside world. Okay, so we now have a UniFi OS server stood up and ready to go, ready to start receiving devices. So at this point, I'm going to take this next-gen gateway out of the box, and let's go ahead and plug it in and get it adopted to this controller. Now, the way I'm going to do that is I have a T-Mobile home internet connection on the other side of this office. I'm going to plug this into the Ethernet of T-Mobile home internet so that it's going out a different internet connection than my main internet connection here. And that is essentially going to simulate, like, if I brought this to a client site, plugged it in, I would be able to then adopt it from that client site into this hosted UniFi controller. All right, so let's get a power cable. And I'm gonna get that all set up and ready to go, and then turn the camera back on when we're ready to rock. Okay, so I have my UXG plugged in. We can see that it is booting up, almost ready to go. And I have UniFi connected to one of the sites, the default site for my new UniFi OS server. It should detect this gateway in just a moment. But before it does that, I do want to do one thing, which is pre-configure the network. So since there's no gateway connected yet, it's going to use default settings, but I don't want it to use default settings. I want to pre-configure the network so that it gets the correct settings, and I want to change the subnet. And the reason we do this is because of site magic. If you're going to be connecting multiple sites together with site magic, they can't have the same default subnet. So I always make it a habit of changing that default subnet as the first thing that I do, and we're going to apply those changes. Okay, so in UniFi, new device found, we're going to say set up. Connecting, and then where it says select a UniFi network application, I'm going to choose Crosstalk hosted UniFi, and then we're going to choose the Crosstalk default site. And of course, if this was for a customer, I would want to set it into the customer site for this particular gateway. So now we can see on my desktop here, it is adopting the gateway. We are also adopting on the UniFi app here. So we're going to let that adopt for just a moment, and then we will come back when it is done. Okay, finished adopting, and now we have an update. So we are going to update the gateway to the latest and greatest, and again, we will come back when it's done. Okay, so there we go. We have adopted my UXG gateway. It has been fully updated, and we can see that it is now online. If we click on UniFi devices, there is my gateway light. And now we can just configure UniFi as we normally would. We can adopt additional devices as we normally would, and you have a fully self-hosted UniFi OS server. All right. If you guys have any questions about any of this, put those down in the comments below. Also remember that there are full written instructions in the blog post, also linked below. And if you guys need any help with UniFi OS Server, UniFi in general, networking in general, or anything related to networking, wireless, or voice over IP, make sure you contact Crosstalk Solutions. We'd be happy to help you out. And if you'd like to keep this party going, I have handpicked a couple of videos on the right here for you to watch next. I haven't picked out what those videos are yet, but I guarantee they will be interesting videos that you are going to love to watch. So click over here for those, and we'll see you in the next one.